Hello everybody, welcome again to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you guys how to make some biscuits, and this is my grandmother's recipe, and just like everybody's grandma, she makes the best biscuits. And if you like, you can pause the video, take down those measurements. Okay, so to start, what you want to do, get a mixing bowl and put in the shortening. I'm using butter as shortening. I suppose you could use Crisco or whatever, but I've always used butter and it comes out well, so no reason to change that around. That's 1 cup of butter, and into that I'm going to add 2 cups of flour. So the next is a half teaspoon salt. I usually measure most things with my hand. I just kind of eyeball it. But if you're a beginner or if you're a perfectionist, of course you can measure it. Oh, the next ingredient was cream of tartar. I don't have any cream of tartar, and I've made this recipe without it and it works just fine. But what cream of tartar does, it helps the leavening agent leaven the biscuits and make them lighter and fluffier. But it's not necessary, so I'm just going to be using baking powder, 4 teaspoons. And then also 2 teaspoons of sugar. I tend to be more specific with my measurements with things like this, like baking powder, where you do need a certain amount for it to work a certain way. But something like sugar or salt, it really doesn't matter that much, so I'm not so much inclined to measure with a measuring spoon. Now the next step is for the butter to be cut into the dry ingredients. The best tool to use for this task is a Cuisinart or a food processor, but since I'm still moving into my new house here, I have absolutely no idea where it is. The next best tool is a pastry knife. I also don't have one of those, so you can also just use a fork and just push the tines down flat into the butter, and what you're trying to do is break the butter up into small pieces, roughly corn kernel sized or pea sized, something like that. You don't want any big chunks. This process here is what makes your biscuits flaky, or if you're making pie dough, it's what makes your pie dough flaky. Because what happens, these little globs of butter, when you roll out the dough and put it in the oven, the little glob of butter melts and makes a pocket of butter, and then the dough around it bakes into the pastry, and then the butter melts into the pastry, and then once the butter is melted in and gone, that creates a little pocket, which is essentially a flake. Since it's been rolled out, that little blob of butter is now flat and it makes the flaky layers that is common to pastry. So that's why you don't want to mix this up too much, and this is just about right. Give you a visual here, just kind of crumbly looking. I prefer to be using very, very cold butter. I keep all my butter in the freezer, but since I don't have a Cuisinart to chop the butter up into the dry mixture, the butter was pretty much room temperature, so I was able to mush it in with a fork. And it'll come out fine, but generally the colder you keep it, the better, because it prevents the butter from melting at room temperature while you're working it and melting into the flour before you're ready to bake it. Now the last ingredient is some sort of dairy product. My recipe said milk or buttermilk. They both work very well. We've used yogurt. You could use sour cream. It all works. I have milk handy. You could also use cream. I've got some half and half in the fridge. The thicker of a dairy product you use, the biscuit tends to come out a little bit more rich and smooth. But anyway, milk will work just fine. Now always start on the shy side. I'm going to pour this, that's maybe just half a cup of milk. I'm going to pour it in. And just work that flour into the milk. Now another key to biscuits, and also pie dough, because they're both pastry, essentially, is you don't want it too wet. It's not a batter, it's not even a bread dough. Bread dough is wetter. Pastry dough, on the other hand, is when you're done with it, it's almost crumbly. And this is actually, see, I didn't even put in enough milk, and this is just about good. See, it's going to be crumbly like that, but a way to test it is if you grab some in your hand and squeeze it, it'll form one solid chunk, which means it does have enough liquid to bind together, yet not so much that it's going to become mushy. Now we want to roll this out onto saran wrap and get the oven ready. So while I'm doing that, I want to throw this into the fridge to keep it nice and cool. Okay, so the oven's almost fully preheated, so I'm going to slide this out onto a sheet of saran wrap. I just carefully fold in the corners and push it together to make it into one solid piece. Now once again, it's best to keep it as cool as possible, and you want to work it as little as possible. This isn't like a yeast bread, a yeast dough where you're supposed to knead it. The more you mess with this, the more it warms up from the heat of your hands, and it's going to be more tough and not as flaky. That's about as good as it's going to get. So you could roll this out into a sheet and cut pieces from it, but what I like to do is just smush it flat. Then I use a cup of an appropriate size. Of course, if you have a cookie cutter or something, that works as well. Roughly 1/2 inch thick. Place that on there. Now there's no particular reason I stack two on top of each other. It's just habit and tradition, I guess. It's how my mother always did it. So therefore, that's how I do it. But if you want to maximize your recipe or something, if you want to make lots of small biscuits or whatever, it doesn't really matter. The only concern is the size of your biscuit will affect the amount of cooking time. So keep that in mind. The recipe says 10 to 12 minutes, and that's pretty good for biscuits this size. And this is roughly, I don't know, 2 inches in diameter, and a total of maybe 3/4 of an inch thick. But if you make little quarter size biscuits, they're going to cook 6 or 8 minutes maybe, I don't know. I've never made them that small. And if you make them bigger, they're going to cook longer, but also if you make them too much bigger, they're not going to cook through into the center, and the outsides are going to get burned before the insides cook. So if you do want to make bigger biscuits for whatever reason, you're going to want to reduce your cooking temperature down to maybe 425 or so. But you're on your own there. Last piece I just kind of roll up and flatten out like a hamburger. Can't really cut it with the... Place that on there. Now we're all set and ready to go. Oven's preheated. 450 degrees. Slide that in there. Now, about 10 minutes later, we'll have some delicious biscuits coming out. Okay, it's been 10 or 11 minutes. They're just right. Slightly golden. Slightly golden brown on top. And one of the benefits of having two layers like this, you can just peel them apart and check to the inside is nice and done. It'll look a little bit wet in the very middle, but it just can't look doughy. Now these are done. I can't wait to have some of these. Got some of my baked beans heating up, and I might heat up some of my chicken chili too. And I'll have some of these biscuits with that, and it'll be a great pairing. And that's what I love about these biscuits. They really go with any sort of food. You can have them with strawberries or some sort of fruit and whipped cream. You could have them as a side dish. You know, peel them open, put some butter in there, some honey, maple syrup. You can use these in the place of dumplings for beef stew. I think they're great. I think they're much better than dumplings for beef stew. Another one of my favorites is to make sausage gravy with biscuits, and these biscuits are a great biscuit to go with sausage gravy and biscuits. Maybe I'll do a video of how to make sausage gravy in the future. It's pretty easy, and boy is it delicious. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope you try it. It's very simple, even for you guys and gals out there that can't cook too well or you think you're not good at it. Just follow the recipe, follow the instructions exactly, and you'll find it's really not too challenging. And at the end of it, you'll have some delicious biscuits to have with your meal. So thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for watching another episode of my cooking videos. So leave a comment. Leave me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this series. I hope to do more of these soon. And thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button if you like this and you want to see more. And if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and come back for more.